To be fair, 2020 wasn't the first time that Anna Franklin had disappeared. She had vanished without a trace before, in 2019 for about 6 months before suddenly re-emerging looking virtually unrecognizable. Of course, to vanish without a trace in Moorton doesn't mean the same as it does in most places, and is basically just another way of saying that she hadn't been seen around town or shopping in the big Combi Mart for a month or two. In Moorton, that was the same as having disappeared. So close-knit was the town and so full of gossiping busybodies nudging and nattering to each other in bus stops and cafes that the slightest movement, or lack of, was always going to be picked up. My dad used to call these local gossips the net curtain twitchers, due to their habit of slowly pulling back their curtains in order to peer out their windows and into everybody else's business. He used to joke that if all other sounds disappeared in Moorton, there would still be a low hum like an electrical appliance audible for miles because of the number of people whispering about each other at one time. In 2020, because she hadn't been spotted for a week or two, most of the whispers said that Anna had disappeared. A few said that Frank had disappeared her. Frank Franklin, whose parents had decided to either be deeply unimaginative or somewhat cruel when naming him, was a regular at the Old Anchor and both a friend and regular drinking partner of my dad's. That he and his wife Anna were having problems was not a secret. In fact, Frank would talk openly about it once he'd had a few ales into him, lamenting how she was constantly flirting with other men and how he had caught her at least twice messaging other men on the phone. A few years earlier, when Anna had been seen around town wearing a cast and with bandages across her face, the rumor had been that Frank had lost his patience with her perceived infidelity and raised his hand to her, breaking her cheekbone, ribs, and wrist in a violent fury. "Look at the state of her," I heard the bus stop prophet saying, adding with a touch of conspiratorial delight that he hasn't been seen around for a while either. Didn't even turn up to the pub the other night for the quiz. He's a big lad, that Frank. I reckon he made a right mess of her because she's been getting about a bit. You know, I heard she was carrying on with etc., etc., etc. Of course, anyone who had actually ever met or spoken to Frank would know that that was nonsense. Not the part about his wife carrying on with someone, that was likely true. But the idea that he would be responsible for Anna's injuries was ridiculous. With soft, wet eyes, shaggy beard, and droopy mustache, Frank looked at a cartoon picture of a mournful old hound dog and was about the gentlest, most soft-spoken guy you could ever wish to meet. Whilst that of course did not mean that he wasn't capable of beating his wife, no one knows what goes on behind closed doors. The fact that he wasn't even in the country when Anna sustained her injuries did. Whilst Anna was parading around town with her injuries and bandages, making sure the rumor mill got grinding, Frank was over in Ireland visiting his sister, which was the reason why he hadn't been seen around town and why he hadn't turned up to the pub quiz that week. He told us about the trip and that he wasn't going to be there for the quiz a few weeks earlier, my dad told me. He even sent us photos of himself with his sister at the time. Clearly, Frank was swimming in the shallow end of the Jane pool because it turns out she got all the good looks in the family. We sent him back photos of a pint we bought in his honor and a potato we said we'd replace him with. To be fair, it made a better contribution to our quiz team than Frank ever does. When I asked my dad about the rumors and Anna's injuries, he said that Anna had told Frank that she'd fallen down the stairs. Though, he added, with a raised eyebrow, Anna tells Frank a lot of things and not many of them are true. When she disappeared for the second time, Frank said nothing about it. It was only when she'd been gone for over 2 months that one of my dad's mates decided to ask him about her, inquiring in as casual a manner as he could about where she might have gotten to and adding that he had not seen your Anna around for a few weeks, before adding the question of whether she was all right. In response, Frank simply shrugged. How should I know? He said, taking a huge swig from his pint and causing a second mustache of foam and bubbles to form on top of his own. And anyway, he added with a sigh, she's not my Anna anymore. At this, my dad said that the questioner, another of his mates named George, had thrown him a worried glance, whilst my dad had checked Frank's hands to see if his wedding ring was still there. It was, but his eyes and demeanor revealed that it might not be for too long. At the risk of joining the ranks of the gossip brigade, my dad told me about the conversation he and Frank had shared on their way home that night, during which my dad had been forced to half carry him most of the way as he staggered on rubber legs. Frank was never a big drinker, and though he enjoyed a pint, once he got past a certain point, he was not really good at holding his ale. That night, he'd been throwing back the drinks like there was no tomorrow, and by the time last orders were called, he virtually slid off the seat like he was made of the liquid he'd just consumed. On the walk, Frank told my dad that Anna had left him, that she had been carrying on with some solicitor in the city, and that she'd only stayed with him for the past year so that she could slowly but surely siphon all the money out of his bank accounts and into others that she had set up in her own name and that of her new partner. "She basically fleeced me," Frank said. "Everything I saved, the money my mom left me in a will, my savings, everything. Don't think this means I'm buying your drinks from now on," my dad had joked, trying to lighten the mood, but Frank was not in the frame of mind to smile. Instead, he burst into tears. Still, where Anna had actually gone, nobody knew, and after she didn't show for almost 6 months, the rumor mill again began to turn. Some say she had taken all of Frank's money and flown to Bermuda. Others that she had given it all to her new lover so that he could open a second office. Others that she had not escaped with a penny and that in fact Frank had done away with her and buried her under his patio. The fact that Frank didn't even have a patio clearly not being of concern to those who wouldn't let details get in the way of a good story. When Anna finally reemerged in Moorton, it was difficult at first to tell that it was even her. Though once she was recognized, it became very clear where all the money had gone. It was a Thursday night, quiz night, and knowing full well that Frank would be in the pub as he was every week, she decided to drop in with her new boyfriend and show off the new her. When I say that Anna was unrecognizable, it was not because she had suddenly found happiness with her new lover, but because she had found a very capable surgeon. Her face, chest, belly, and backside had been completely remodeled and reshaped. In some places, stuff had been taken away and sucked out. In others, a large amount of stuff had quite clearly been put in. There were now curves where there previously had not been, and flat where there had once been curves. Most striking, however, was the face. Whilst everyone was used to seeing things like lip and cheek fillers, Botox, and facelifts, this was a complete remodeling. Whoever had helped to restructure and remodel Anna's face must have had taken a hammer to the bone structure, because she didn't simply look a little different. Her jaw was a completely different shape, her cheekbones and the ridges above her eyes in totally different places. When she paraded on her high heels into that bar Thursday night, it was safe to say that most of the patrons were taken back. This was why she had been missing for so long. It had taken her months to heal. At first, Frank tried to ignore her, but as time went on and she continued to howl in her obnoxious, overbearing laugh, my dad noticed Frank's eyes wandering over time and time again to the bar. Strangely, he said, it seemed as if Frank was looking not at her but through her, as if hoping that somewhere beneath this new synthetic shell that she had constructed, the old Anna would still be hiding. Though of course that was an illusion. The old Anna was long gone. Toward the end of the night, the new Anna passed by the table where my dad, Frank, and the rest of the quiz team were sitting. Sneering down her nose, she regarded Frank with all the love and affection one might show to something a dog had left on the pavement. Gripping her new chest ornaments, she shook them slightly and said, "Money well spent, eh, Frank?" Before again howling with hideous laughter and teetering over the place on her new flame's arm. All Frank said in response was, "I wish I could take it back. There must be a way to take it back," before he got up and stormed out of the door, leaving his pint half drunk on the table. That one appearance was the last time anyone saw Anna. After that, she disappeared again. Of course, the pandemic and the lockdowns meant that sightings of anyone were rare, and the rumor mill did grind to a halt for at least a few months. By the time things started to get back to normal, most people had forgotten about Anna and whether they had seen her or not. The next anyone heard of her was in January of 2023, a few days after Frank died. When Frank didn't show for the quiz, without so much as a message or call, my dad immediately became worried. He tried to contact him several times, and when he didn't receive no answer for a few days, decided to contact his sister to see if she'd heard from him. When she said she hadn't, my dad decided it was worth mentioning Frank's absence to the local police. At first they acted slowly, since Frank wasn't exactly missing. In fact, it was only a week later when the neighbors started to report a bad smell coming from Frank's flat that the police were convinced to force open the door and found that Frank was dead. To everyone's shock and surprise, Frank had taken his own life. What shocked people more, however, was that he had taken his wife with him. In his hand when his body was found, Frank had a note that said, "She's probably gone by now," followed by an address for a small breeze block garage that he owned nearby. When the police investigated that location, they found what was later confirmed to be the body of Anna Franklin. Initially, however, the officers had trouble identifying her. Not because the surgery had changed her appearance, but because, in the words of one officer, she did not look human at all. The reason for this was because of what Frank had done to her, or rather what he had allowed to happen. Along with the address in Frank's hand, he held a page torn from an old book, A Voyage Around the World by George Anson, which I later found out was published in 1748. On the page in question, he had circled two particular sections. They were descriptions of symptoms experienced by sailors suffering from scurvy, a lack of vitamin C in their diet, and one of the horrible things that can occur as a result. In the account, the author describes how a man who had been injured in battle years earlier, but whose wounds had fully healed, found that when suffering from scurvy, the healing was reversed. Broken bones long repaired became broken again, and scar tissue first became loose and elastic before opening back up entirely. What Frank discovered in this old book was that healing is not a thing that happens and then is over. Scars and the knitting together of broken bones is an ongoing process that the body continues to do using collagen. When a person is denied vitamin C, the body stops producing the collagen. The result is that scars, healed for years, begin to unknit and to open up again. Bones broken that have healed begin to unknit. Scars burst open. All healing suddenly reverses itself as the victim is left in a state of screaming agony. Frank had found a way to take it back. When Anna was found, tied to a chair and hooked up to a drip that gave her just enough nutrients to keep her alive, it was noted that vitamin C was not amongst the things that she'd been given, nor were painkillers. Over the course of months, for almost a year, Anna essentially melted like a wax figure thrown upon a bonfire. The scars from all of her surgery popping and splitting back open, the broken bones becoming undone, withering to a shatter of splinters once again. For a while after this, the gossips went silent. What is there left to say when you've spread 1,000 rumors, but the truth is something worse?